Hi, I'm Tom with a list of interesting things. Today is Wednesday, October 29th, 2020, meaning there are just 5 days left before Election Day. Today on the list of interesting things is the newly confirmed justiceship of Amy Coney Barrett. Before we start, make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on all the most interesting things. As of Monday evening, Amy Coney Barrett is a Supreme Court justice. This is a momentous occasion, whether you like Justice Barrett or not. Her confirmation marks one of the quickest and most controversial confirmation processes in American history, and it comes at a very interesting time. The timing surprised me, as I imagine it surprised many others, not only because it is representative of word-breaking by Senate Republicans, see our court-packing video for more on that, but also that it happened before the election at all. Today I'd like to discuss the possible reasons for the confirmation happening so fast, and the potential political ramifications of the event. Historically, Supreme Court seats have taken months to fill, with the average length of a vacancy at about 2 months in the modern era, at least that is before 2016, and quite a bit longer from before that. The longest in modern history was just in 2016, in the 2016-2017 vacancy, 422 days of Justice Scalia. The vacancy of Justice Ginsburg's seat, however, lasted only a little more than a month, with very swift turnover time considering the ongoing pandemic and looming election. Why did this happen this way? A quick answer is that Senate Republicans and the Republican Party wanted it done before the election. But why? It's a dangerous move politically. If I were Senate Majority Leader McConnell and I were out for political power most of all, not that I'm saying he necessarily is, I would have sworn her in on the 7th. That's a few days after the election. The Supreme Court is a major issue in the minds of most Americans, especially in the minds of conservatives who maybe have old-fashioned ideas about Roe v. Wade or same-sex marriage or immigration. It pushes people to the polls, and it energizes the conservative base for whom things are very serious issues like this. But for now, it's off the table. Not only are those conservatives not as energized as they might have been a week ago, but now Senate Republicans have opened themselves up to real attacks. I'm certain that in hot seats like North Carolina or Montana, Arizona or Georgia, independent and Democratic voters are getting hammered with ads about Senate Republicans breaking their word. So, in my opinion, it's an incredible risk to confirm Judge Barrett before the election. This kind of action will all but guarantee they'll lose more seats than they would have otherwise. There is, of course, the argument that doing it before the election as opposed to during the lame duck period would add legitimacy to the appointment. Perhaps it would alleviate some of the potential blowback from both their own voters and especially from prominent Democrats, rather than if they had gotten it done after the election, in the lame duck period before a Biden presidency. But I'm not sure that this pans out. For better or worse, prominent Democrats like Pelosi and Schumer have intimated that there would be hell to pay if Senate Republicans broke their word and their precedent by confirming a Supreme Court justice without electoral input. I can't imagine that there would be a serious difference in retaliation just because the confirmation came a few days before the election as opposed to a few days after. So why, I wonder then, have they confirmed her? The date on the 10th for the Obamacare ruling springs to mind, but they could easily have pushed that back a week instead of pushing her confirmation forward. So, why? I find this somewhat painful and unhappy to say, but the only thing that I can think of, and I encourage you to contradict me in the comments, but the only thing that I can think of is that the answer is electoral in nature, that the Republican Party is gearing up for an electoral fight over some of the more questionable tactics that they've been using. We've touched on some of these before. Things like the president actively suppressing vote-by-mail efforts, ballot drop-off suppression in things like Texas and attempts at the same in Pennsylvania, not to mention the president stating on more than one occasion that the only way that they lose is if the other side cheats, seeding in the minds of the populace that cheating is likely, stating that he may not accept the results of the election, spinning a narrative that makes it seem more likely that cheating will happen, so that whether or not cheating happens, there's legitimacy to the claim after the election that cheating did happen. There have also been suggestions by state parties, justices, and the president that ballots valid according to state law but received after Election Day may not be counted, suggestions that a change in prospective leader in the vote totals after Election Day may be evidence of fraud. This is obviously ridiculous to anyone who's familiar with the 2000 election, which wasn't decided until December, but I digress. I think it's fairly safe to glean from this evidence that the Republican Party, or the president, or both, may attempt to litigate the outcome of the election if the outcome changes after Election Day through the influx of absentee ballots. And it stands to reason that the rush of this confirmation could be for just such an occasion. So, the litigants might hope, there will be a clear conservative majority on the court when the presidency is in question. Now, all this is quite dark and deeply concerning, but, and I'm allowing my hopeful side to show here, I don't think it's necessarily cause for alarm. President Trump may have erroneously planted in the minds of the populace and in the minds of a new generation of young voters that the election system in the United States is not to be trusted. The Republican parties of Texas, Pennsylvania, California, and North Carolina may indeed be actively attempting to litigate that ballots be disposed of. These are problems. However, the Supreme Court is not built of puppets. It's difficult to sway and even more difficult to control. Justices Sotomayor, Gorsuch, Alito, and Justice Roberts have all shown the ability to make decisions on either side of the fence over the years. I don't know what kind of person Amy Coney Barrett is. She's conservative, that's for sure, but whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is a matter of perspective. She's also under pressure, that's for sure too. If I'm correct, and she's been Rush confirmed explicitly so that she will be on the bench to rule on the election, she is likely under constant pressure from Republican lawmakers and the president himself. But from what I can tell, from the view that I have, which is admittedly narrow, she doesn't seem like a bad person, or a corrupt person. She seems like the sort of person that, if nominated under normal circumstances, wouldn't have been all that terribly notable. There would have been complaints, sure, and I would have agreed with many of them, but she's not exactly radical, at least not exceedingly radical. Many of the more liberal colleagues that I have will call me foolish for this statement, but I have faith in this institution. I have faith in John Roberts and Samuel Alito and Neil Gorsuch. I have faith that when push comes to shove, the U.S. Supreme Court will rule not with politics on their minds, but the future of the country. And that means making sure that every person who voted, in accordance with state laws, gets their votes counted. If push comes to shove, and the fate of the democracy rests on the shoulders of these 9 people, I have faith that they will not shrug. Now, I could be wrong. Wouldn't be the first time. So I say that the best thing to do would be to make the margins in favor of your candidate, whoever that may be, so strong as to be legally unassailable. If you are a Trump supporter, make sure you get to the polls. Make the margins so wide that no amount of absentee ballots could overcome the deficit. And to everyone else, anyone living in Pennsylvania or Florida or Texas, if you get your ballot in late, people may say that it doesn't count. Don't give them that chance. Vote now. If you haven't voted already, there's still early vote time in most states. Still absentee vote drop-off boxes. Take your ballots in. If you want to vote in person, vote in person. No matter who your candidate is, make it a blowout, so we never have to have these terrible, terrible questions answered. We will be uploading consistently between now and November the 3rd. I encourage you to check back for election predictions and even more myriad interesting things. And until next time, be like the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett. Be, how about swift and decisive and, stalwart. And above all, be interesting. I'll see you next time.